Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. In this video, we're starting the second lesson of the introduction module, where we'll be talking about bar charts, also known as Gantt charts, a popular and widely used method for scheduling construction projects. In this lesson, you'll learn three things. First, we'll go over the definition of bar chart schedules, or Gantt charts. Next, I'll show you how to create them. And finally, we'll talk about the pros and cons of using Gantt charts. All right, let's start by talking about what exactly the bar chart method is. You might have heard it called a Gantt chart. It was actually developed by Henry Gantt back in 1917 to help illustrate project schedules. Basically, it's a visual way to map out a project timeline, making it much easier to see the plan at a glance. Now, how does it work? Well, a bar chart is a time-scale diagram. Each activity in the project is shown as a horizontal bar, and the length of that bar represents how long the activity will take. Plus, the position of the bar tells us when that activity starts and when it's supposed to finish. Pretty simple, right? All right. Let's take a look at an example of a time-scaled axis. The time unit can be a day, a week, a month, or even a year. Since construction projects are usually large and can take months or even years to complete, we don't typically use smaller units like hours or minutes. If you want a more detailed schedule, you could break it down by days. But if you're focusing on the big picture, like major construction phases or summary activities, you can use larger time units like weeks, months, or even years. So how do we show an activity on the schedule? We use a horizontal bar, where the length of the bar represents the duration of the activity. For example, if an activity lasts 3 days, the bar will stretch across 3 days. The start and end points of the bar show when the activity begins and finishes. One key thing to remember, activities always start at the beginning of the day and finish at the end of the day. Now, let's say you have another activity, activity B, that starts on day 4 and finishes on day 6. The schedule bar for this activity will start at the beginning of day 4 and extend to the end of day 6, just like this. When you have multiple activities, it's best to present them in a single column following a chronological order, just like a well-organized timeline. This diagram shows an example of a Gantt chart. First, you'll want to put all the activities in the first column, which is on the left side. Next, you'll draw the bar representations of these activities on the right side of the diagram. Just remember, you need to order the activities chronologically. This means that as you go from the top to the bottom, the start dates of the activities will increase. And for larger projects, you might want to divide the activities into separate groups based on different project phases. Then, you can order the activities in each group chronologically. And remember, the order of activities within one group may not depend on the activities in other groups. You can also use an additional bar to show a summary of a project phase. The length of this summary bar represents the total duration of that phase. In this example, the project is split into 2 phases, so you'll have 2 separate summary bars to represent each phase. Finally, you can create another bar to represent the summary of the whole project. Milestones are another key element of the project schedule. They mark major achievements or the completion of critical tasks. On a Gantt chart, milestones are usually shown as diamonds or markers along the timeline. They help track progress and make sure the project stays on schedule. For example, in a construction project, milestones might include completing the foundation or the structural frame. This gives everyone a clear view of the project's key accomplishments. When it comes to bar chart format, there are plenty of variations to choose from. As I mentioned in the last video, you can pick any value for the time scale based on what works best for your project. It could be days, weeks, months, or even years. And you also have the flexibility to decide whether or not to include non-working days in the timescale. If you include non-working days, like in the schedule shown here, you'll see that the non-working days are highlighted in gray. Now, for situations where an activity spans across a non-working period, like the control and performance activities in this example, the bar length will appear longer than the actual activity duration. But if you decide to remove the non-working days from the schedule, the bar length will match the activity duration exactly. Another variation you can make on the bar chart is to remove all the individual activities and only keep the summary bars. This can be really helpful when you're communicating the schedule to higher-level project managers who don't need to know the details of every single activity. Instead, you can just show the overall schedule with only the summary activities. Here's an example of a summary bar chart. As you can see, it doesn't include any specific tasks, but instead, it shows a few bars representing the major project phases like excavation, foundation, framing, and finish interior. Another popular format for bar charts is to integrate actual project performance data, like the percent work complete for each activity, into the as-planned schedule. To show the actual progress, you can shade the bars to reflect how much work is done. For this type of schedule, you typically add a red vertical line to mark the current date. It is basically the time when you evaluate the project status, like at the end of April in this example. This schedule is often called the updated schedule. So how do you develop this updated schedule? Let's assume the excavation phase is completed, so you shade the entire bar for it. The foundation is also done, so it's completely shaded. But framing has only completed 50% of the work, so only half of that bar gets shaded. Finally, finished interior hasn't started yet, so it stays white. This type of schedule is a really powerful tool in project management. It can quickly tell you if you're ahead or behind schedule. For example, as you can see, by the current date, the framing was supposed to be about 70% complete, but the actual progress is only 50%, which means the project is behind schedule. Evaluating project performance this way is super intuitive, which is why this format of bar chart is so widely used in practice. And here's an important note when creating bar chart schedules: never use non-continuous bars. Each activity should be represented by one and only one bar. If you need to split an activity into sub-activities for easier management, don't break the bar. Instead, create separate activities and use different bars to represent them. Alright, that wraps up this video on how to develop a bar chart schedule. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.